coastlines. Across the vast Indo-Pacific, shipping lanes, straits, and channels function as the nervous system of global trade and diplomacy. Lately, those arteries of commerce have also become a stage for hard power, a place where ships and aircraft do more than move. They speak. Their movements are being read as deliberate, calibrated displays of presence, and their meanings ripple from Beijing to Washington, from Tokyo to Manila. What plays out on a nautical chart is never purely technical. A carrier strike group steaming along a corridor, a flotilla maneuvering near a disputed shoal, an aerial patrol skimming a busy sea lane, each becomes a sentence in a contested conversation. Those sentences are being composed against a backdrop of larger Allied drills, renewed force postures, and political leaders who have placed defense and deterrence at the top of their agenda. On April 20, 2026, two converging narratives crystallized. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported that the Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning transited the Taiwan Strait. On the same day, Allied forces opened the annual Balikatan exercises in the Philippines, an addition noticeably larger and more diversified than in years past. Fight. Involving more than 17,000 personnel from the Philippines, the United States and partners including Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and New Zealand. Those parallel movements, compressed message and optics, carrier transits demonstrate reach, test surveillance and response, and create images that domestic and international audiences interpret immediately. For Beijing, official statements frame these naval task group movements as training, routine drills to prepare forces for sustained operations farther from home. The People's Liberation Army's theatre commands describe activities in the East China Sea, the Taiwan Strait and east of Luzon in technical language, sea-air coordination, live-fire shooting, rapid manoeuvring, and the underway replenishment. For everyone watching, each transit carries symbolism. For Tokyo, routine can become risk when assets move close to islands and corridors that have outsized strategic sensitivity. Japan's leadership has embraced a more assertive security posture and has warned that while international law allows passage through international waters, any violation of sovereign territorial seas would prompt consequences. Those statements are not mere legal technicalities. They are political signaling directed at domestic audiences and neighboring capitals. For Taipei and Washington, the Taiwan Strait is commonly framed as international waters whose passage should not be cause for alarm. For Beijing, the same moves can be cast in a different legal and political light. That mismatch of interpretation is the heart of the danger. One nation's freedom of navigation operation is another's deliberate intrusion. One country's routine training is another's calibrated coercion. The same set of movements viewed from two capitals can look like reassurance or like escalation. The Balikatan exercises themselves amplified that counterpoint. Long a cornerstone of US-Philippines security cooperation, this year's iteration expanded in scale and partners. The drills ranged from amphibious operations and live-fire exercises to air and naval interoperability missions staged across the Philippine archipelago and in waters facing the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. For Washington and Manila, the exercises were framed as reassurance, proof of Allied capacity to operate together and support the Philippines' sovereignty and maritime rights. For Beijing, participation by multiple external partners near areas of perceived Chinese interest was cast as provocative, a risk to regional stability. Those short, sharp diplomatic exchanges are meant to shape how domestic and international audiences interpret the unfolding pattern of activity. Yet China's response has not been confined to rhetoric. The PLA's Southern Theatre Command confirmed naval drills east of Luzon, placing surface combatants and support ships within sightlines of key Philippine sea lanes. Open-source images and satellite photographs circulating online showed modern surface combatants operating in coordinated evolutions. Analysts pointed to the presence of Type 055 guided missile destroyers among task groups, symbols of China's expanding surface fleet. For many observers, the technical details of ship classes and sortie profiles deepen impressions of capability and intent. For commercial mariners, what plays out as strategic messaging becomes a practical calculus. The Indo-Pacific contains some of the world's busiest and most economically vital maritime passages. Energy tankers, container ships, and bulk carriers funnel through choke points where military and civilian traffic regularly intersect. When navies flex, insurers and shippers reevaluate risk profiles. Temporary safety zones can appear, freight routing changes, port schedules are adjusted and premiums rise. Even absent direct conflict, the perception of risk affects transit times and market expectations. Local fishing patterns shift, tourism bookings are postponed, and families in coastal towns follow the headlines and ask what comes next. These are not abstract effects. The dry line on a chart, the separation of sea lanes, and the establishment of a temporary exclusion zone can suddenly feel like fault lines for supply chains. Merchant captains plot alternate routes. Port operators coordinate revised berthing windows. Logistics planners factor in potential delays. In an interconnected economy, a tense week at sea can ripple through factory schedules, commodity markets, and household budgets far from the waves. Analysts emphasize that interpretation matters as much as presence. The same set of actions will be decoded differently depending on recent history, domestic politics, and the audiences each government must address that decoding is never neutral. The Taiwan Strait provides a particularly acute example. When a carrier or flotilla moves through that narrow corridor, capitals decode intent as much as they track position. That decoding should not be dismissed as mere rhetoric. It shapes real operational choices and political reactions. In an era when sensors, networking, and weapons compress decision timelines, the need for mechanisms that reduce the risk of accident or miscalculation becomes urgent. Military leaders are next that stress practical tools, transparency about scheduled exercises, hotlines between navies, and agreed procedures for incident handling. A secure, tested channel to clarify whether a radar lock was intentional or accidental, and a mutual process to investigate can prevent a mistake from ballooning into crisis. Such mechanisms are uneven across the region. Some bilateral relationships maintain robust deconfliction channels. Others are less practiced. Political frictate. ION can hamper functional military-to-military dialogue. Where communication is weak, so too is the capacity to de-escalate quickly. Strengthening forums, encouraging direct service-to-service contacts, and codifying procedures for sea encounters would not eliminate competition, but they would lower the odds that an unintended encounter leads to escalation. There is a practical two-track approach that many strategists advocate: deterrence and dialogue. Credible defense postures can be paired with sustained diplomatic engagement. Robust readiness sends signals about capability and commitment, sustained channels of communication and confidence-building measures, reduce misperceptions. The challenge for leaders is to demonstrate resolve without foreclosing avenues for de-escalation. That tension plays out in domestic politics as well as in strategic calculations. Leaders must justify readiness at home while avoiding moves that lock them into reflexive escalation. Public rhetoric, careful. For the conflict, lie-elated can reassure domestic audiences without needlessly provoking neighbors. Military drills can contest interoperability without crossing red lines that invite retaliatory action. For coastal communities, port operators, and mariners, the immediate preference is predictability. For merchants and insurers, consistent notice of exercises, clear limits on exclusion zones, and timely information about incidents are practical risk mitigants. For policymakers, the urgent task is to sustain credible deterrence while creating practical, tested mechanisms for preventing and managing incidents. Many security professionals are modest in their expectations. Incremental agreements to exchange notifications of major exercises, standardized procedures for unforeseen encounters at sea, and stronger regional incident investigation mechanisms will not erase rivalry, but they will lower the danger of miscalculation. The responsibility for keeping sea lanes open falls to multiple actors. Navies and coast guards who patrol these waters must remain professional and disciplined in encounters at sea. Diplomats must keep the channels of political communication active. Commercial stakeholders, shippers, port authorities must invest in contingency plans and updated navigational intelligence. Regional forums can provide a venue for shaping rules of the road, but those forums require buy-in from capitals that may be skeptical of one another's motives. That is why the choreography at sea matters beyond the hardware of ships and aircraft. Actors don't speak only with press releases. They speak with radar tracks, with underway replenishment, with coordinated aerial patrols, and with movements of platforms whose presence alters tactical geometry. Every sortie and every replenishment at sea is watched closely. For peers and rivals alike, these are not neutral technical exercises. They are signals to domestic audiences and to foreign capitals about capability, intent, and resolve. The choices made in the weeks and months ahead will determine whether the Indo-Pacific navigates a difficult chapter of competition with restraint or drifts into a cycle of risky signaling. There is no inevitability that tensions will become conflict. Much depends on the professionalism of sailors and aviators at sea, on the existence of credible practice mechanisms for preventing and managing incidents, and on leaders who can couple deterrence with dialogue. Practical, incremental steps can make a difference. Routine exchanges of exercise notifications among regional militaries would reduce surprises. Agreed procedures for safe conduct during close encounters, the maritime equivalent of traffic laws, would limit dangerous improvisation. Joint exercises that include deconfliction drills and incident response rehearsals build shared habits that can be relied on under stress. A tested hotline between commanders at sea and clear protocols for investigation after an incident are concrete risk mitigants. Political leadership matters too. Public statements that reassure domestic audiences without demonizing neighbors can lower the temperature. Transparency about operational objectives where feasible reduces the space for worst-case assumptions. And where trust is too thin for direct coordination, multilateral forums and third-party mediators can provide channels to test confidence-building measures incrementally. For merchants and insurers, predictability is the immediate concern. For policymakers, the urgent task is to sustain credible deterrence while creating practical, tested mechanisms for preventing and managing incidents. For publics across the region, the essential question is whether the new normal will be one of stable competition with clear rules or one of risky signaling without the guardrails that keep accidents from becoming crises. The healthy path, the path that preserves commerce and reduces risk, is a balance of strength and statesmen. Hip, readiness and deterrence are important. So is diplomacy and the slow work of building routines that make dangerous encounters less likely to spiral. Geography concentrates friction. Modern weapons compress decision timelines. Narratives shape how actions are received. For if actors choose to pair deterrence with dialogue, if they institutionalize procedures that limit the chance of miscalculation, the seas can remain a conduit for prosperity rather than a cause for fear. In the coming days and months, the choreography at sea will continue to be a language. Leaders can choose how aggressively that language is used. They can opt for gestures that reassure and deter, or for moves that shorten timelines and narrow options. The rewards for getting it right are profound. A region where strategic competition is managed, trade flows remain steady, and the seas remain a source of livelihood and stability. The risk is real, so is the responsibility. The hands that steer policy ashore hold comms. Frequencies for those at sea. Mariners, coastal communities, and the economies that rely on their waters will feel the impact of those choices, for better or for worse.